This video has been classified as M. It is recommended for people aged 15 years and over.
This is Big Ideas from the ABC.
Thank you. I'm going to start off by talking for a few minutes about issues that I'm very passionate about, and I'm very happy to have these fascinating young men.
Thank you. Oh, that's nice. Isn't she nice?
Yeah. To discuss this all with.
That's a good start.
Now, the whole topic of what men want came from research I did a few years ago, looking at differences between men and women in desire. I was out there recruiting couples to talk to me and to write diaries about how they negotiate sex in their relationships. And I was getting couples from all over Australia, and I had a whole lot of older couples, but I didn't have enough young ones. And I actually went to Robbie and said, could we do an interview on Triple J? I don't know whether you remember
I
that.
do know, I remember, yeah.
And it was really good because we got all these young people volunteering, and one man wrote into the radio station and said, "Will you pass this on to the dirty old lady?" which I thought was rather cute. He said, "Just kidding," which I was pleased about. But so what it was all about was how do couples deal with differences in desire. I ended up with 98 couples who kept diaries for me for up to a year, talking about how they deal with those sorts of issues. And I had couples who both were really into sex. I had couples where she wanted more sex than he did. But the vast majority of couples who volunteered for me were the women who spent their lives dreading the hand creeping towards them in the middle of the night, and the men who spent their lives grovelling for sex, or having sex doled out to them like meaty bites to a dog, as one man said. And this is the major issue, the problem of the sex-starved man. And there are so many jokes out there around this whole topic. My favourite involves 3 married men who are out on a golf course and early in the morning, and they're chatting, and one of them says, "Oh, you have no idea what I had to do to be allowed out today. I had to promise my wife I'd repaint the whole house." The second man says, "Oh, that's nothing. I had to agree to remodel the kitchen." And the third man says nothing, and they finally turned to him and said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, "Oh, it was easy. I set the alarm for 5 o'clock, and when I woke up, I nudged my wife and said, 'Golf course or intercourse?' 'Don't forget your jumper,' she said." I noticed that the American comedian Steve Martin has a comment on this. He says, "You know that look women get when they want sex? Me neither." So it's well and truly out there, and that was absolutely the issue that I was very involved in this research. And the problem is that women don't get it. Many women don't understand why sex is so important to men. We think, "Oh, for goodness sake, it's just sex. Go run around the oval or have a cold shower." And what we don't understand is, it's not about men. When men talk to me about this, they say it's not about getting their rocks off. It's not about sexual relief. They all know they can masturbate, if that was all it was all about. It's about connection. It's about feeling close to the women they love. And one of the amazing things I had, because I was getting these diaries in every day, and I could take ideas that were coming through from one group of people and try them out on another. And so the women were talking to me about being groped, saying that they liked their husband's arms around them, they liked to cuddle, but inevitably the hand would end up on the breast or the bottom and it would turn into a grope, and I hate being groped, they said. So one lovely woman said, "Every time we spoon, I get forked." A major problem. Anyway, so I went to a group of the men and I said, "Tell me about the grope. Why do you do it if she says she hates it?" And one of the men wrote back to me and said, "Look, I know I'm going to get into trouble. I know she doesn't like it. But it's me saying, 'Hello, here I am. I still love you. I still want you. Where has she gone, the lover I married?'" I found all of that very moving. I've spent so many years listening to men talk about what it's like to be constantly rejected. And it's a real issue for them. This is the major sex problem across the country. This is what's causing an enormous amount of strife in relationships. So that's all about mating in captivity. But I also thought we might also talk about mating in the wild, the whole business of being a single man, and that's a very interesting thing as well. I was reading some really interesting research the other day which talked about college students in America, and they found that 10% of the men were getting 80% of the sex, which I thought was rather interesting, that the really hot, good-looking jocks or successful men in various ways were the ones that all the women were pursuing and willing to go to bed with, and there were a whole lot of group of single men on the side who weren't getting very much. And I think there are really interesting stories we can talk about in terms of the single man's experience. And then what's it like? I mean, these young men getting lots of sex, what sort of preparation is that for when the tap gets turned off, when they end up in living in domesticated relationships and having to deal with those sort of frustrations? One of the things that really interests me around the whole male sexuality is the fact that we hardly ever hear male sexuality being talked about without men being in trouble, with men without it being talked about in a sort of negative way. And there was a fascinating book I read a few years ago it was originally by a young woman, a young feminist writer who has a sex change. She's a transsexual. Her name is Max. His name is Max Valerio, and the book was called The Testosterone Files. Really interesting, because here's this young woman who gets all this testosterone, and she's just blown over at what it's like living with that sort of sexual urgency, walking down the street and not being able to walk past a newsagent with all these sexy women on the cover of magazines and irresistibly drawn to sexual images. But one of the things that really struck me about what he wrote was he talked also about the women's shows on television, the Oprah Winfrey type shows, where there's a passing parade of men in trouble over sex. Men who are in trouble for not keeping their trousers zipped, or for having affairs, for looking at women in the wrong way, for being caught looking at a woman's cleavage, or for thinking about sex in the wrong way. I mean, and from this man's point of view, to see this constant tut-tutting and finger-wagging and presentation of male sexuality as something so negative was really striking, and I thought that was quite fascinating. Because I've always felt that we don't give men much chance to celebrate their sexuality, to talk about it as what it is, which is this wonderful, really positive element of men's lives. And I hope we're going to have a bit of a discussion around that. Because I find that for lots of men, sex is a wonderful part of their lives. It's something they love to talk about, they love to be good at. I mean, that's another really interesting issue, because women are always saying to me, well, women would want more sex if men weren't such rubbish at it, which is another interesting question. Is the problem that men are lousy lovers? And certainly there are lots of jokes out there about men as lousy lovers. What's the difference between a golf ball and a G-spot? A man will spend 20 minutes looking for a golf ball. So, I mean, I acknowledge that this is part of the problem, this whole issue of men who don't have a clue, men who don't know what to do and don't care. But I've also spent many years of my life with men talking to me about wanting to be good in bed, wanting to know what to do and having real trouble finding anyone that will teach them. When I was doing my diaries, this is one of the things I talked to a lot of the men about, and they were just so fascinating because they were talking about how rare it is that a woman will actually guide them in how to make love to her. One man said to me, all I get from her are little grunts occasionally, and I can't tell whether it's an ouch or an ah. The chapter on this in the Sex Diaries is called The Blind Man in the Dark, Searching for a Black Cat That's Never There. And that's a man who spent 20 years trying to stimulate his wife's clitoris and never got it right. I mean, I love this image of him peering around in the dark. That is also part of the story, the whole question of the fact that women aren't always so easy to please and whether we do a good enough job teaching men. And there's a British comedian who sums up this whole problem very nicely. Her name is Jenny LeCote. He, labouring away, pauses to ask, "Are you nearly there?" "It's hard to say," says she. If you imagine it as a journey from here to China, where would you be, he asks. She considers the kitchen. So, moving on. Your moment has come,
All right.
guys. So I thought we might just start off by just asking each of you to give us a bit...
Ask him first.
It's turning pale. To give us a bit of a potted history. I mean, are you married? What about you? How long were you
Not together.
single? No. And, just a little bit of a history of your sex life. Tim?
Would you like to take this first, Tim?
Oh, well, Well, I was 13. It was an amazing experience. I was alone, how the old joke goes. I've been married for 5 years next week. Mm-hmm. And that's probably my third or fourth long-term relationship until this relationship with Michelle. And, I have a 20-month-old child. Great.
And did you spend long periods single?
No.
Mating in the wild?
Yeah, when I could, but I always found myself... I'm a serial monogamous who sometimes has a problem with monogamy.
Okay.
And so, I never had, probably in my early 20s I might have had 2 to 3 years of being single, but otherwise maybe 6 months, 8 months being single.
And when you were single, were you one of the guys picking up the girls or watching from the sidelines?
Depending on what stage of my life, I think it's hard. It's interesting to talk about that. When you're a boy and you're 18, you suddenly find yourself, you go to nightclubs and you go to pubs and you're competing with men. Yeah. And you're always a pimply little, skinny little 18-year-old boy, and girls don't want to know about you. And this wonderful thing happens is, the older you get, women sort of get a little more desperate, and you sort of they get over the good-looking guys, and guys like me just pounce when they're vulnerable, and that's how I got my wife, who's really quite beautiful, and she was just sort of this wounded little thing, and I just came along and was a nice person, and that's it. But it was, it's very hard to compete with those
jocks,
the jock type guys in a nightclub or a pub situation when you're in 18 or in your early 20s. Because they always win.
So there's hope for us all.
Yeah, so I think it's a sort of women. The girls are quite shallow at that time, and then I was talking to someone at work about it the other day, and they said they get older, and then in fact you might have to be confident and have a sense of humour comes into play, and then they're much more interested in you, which is sort of handy. So I sort of look at it that I did my 20s, and then in my 30s I relived my 20s with a better wardrobe and a bit more money.
And you came into your own.
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
What about you, Robbie?
Well, I'm married. I've been with my partner for about a little over 10 years, about 10 and a half years. We only got married a few years ago, but we have a 9-year-old child. So we started going out at work, and not very many people knew. Both of us had come out of really quite long-term relationships. And neither of us were really wanting to go into a long-term relationship with anybody else. And we started seeing each other a bit at work, but we thought we'd keep it quiet. And we saw each other for about 6 months, and, we were still umming and ahhing about just taking it slowly, and then she fell pregnant. And so we had this giant moment of, shit! And, we ummed and ahed and went, well, let's do it together, And so we've had this really very lucky scenario where it's actually worked out, and we had another child, and then both our children came to our wedding, and it's been really lovely like that.
It's very nice of you to invite them.
Yeah. They just turned up. It's unbelievable, isn't it? And so, but that said, it's been different in that way as well. We didn't really have that, those few years together where you knock about a bit and do lots of overseas travel or get to know each other as a partner without somebody else in the family a little bit. And so that's been part of the negotiation as well.
What about when you were younger?
When I was younger, look, I had a few years of knocking about, which was... I was never.
Did you do well?
I was never hugely successful, but I had these wonderful moments. I mean, I was always a little bit shy about it, to be honest. And there were always, those other guys that were really confident and really good at it. But I had these wonderful times just when, really sexy women would sometimes just go, "Come on, let's go." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." I was at a nightclub once, and this girl was. This girl and I had been dancing a little bit, and this big guy comes in, and I think, well, that's the end of that. And she's literally sitting on his lap in this nightclub, and I'm sitting there with a group of friends, and she just leans over to me and goes, "Meet me outside in 4 minutes." And I went, "What?" I think, my ears are, boo, boo, boo. He said, "What? Meet me outside in 4 minutes." And then she got up and left. I'm looking at my watch, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, boom, and it was on. It was great. So there are little moments like that which have been fantastic.
Did you worry? Were women good at teaching you what to do? Did you worry?
Yes, they were actually. I mean, some of them were, because it's a matter of. When you're younger, obviously, for a lot of men, you're not confident about it at all. I'd gone to a boys' boarding school as well, so there was this. My first girlfriend rang up the boarding house and asked for me. We had one telephone in the boarding house, and she rang up the boarding house and said, "I want to speak to Robert Buck." And I get to this phone, and there's this girl on the end, and she goes, "Oh, that one of the kids who was in your class got expelled recently. He was talking about you. I thought I'd ring up." And I went, "What?" She said, "Yeah." And so we had this great phone conversation, and she ended up being my first ever girlfriend. And we went out for a year or so. It was just fantastic. So, yeah, and she was, very informative.
Do you think it's a big deal for males to be good in bed? Does it really matter?
You'd think so. But, good in bed is...
What does that mean, yeah?
Well, what does it mean? And I think this is where, when you're young, you can get it wrong very quickly, in that and I think this is probably getting worse too, considering how much porn there is around, that the expectation of what is good in bed is some stallion that pounds for an hour, before doing a backflip and ejaculating over. Whereas really good in bed is actually about being intimate and being close and being caring and giving, really. I mean, I know that sounds a bit metro, but it's... Yeah. I'm 40 and, I kind of realise now that is... That's my old girlfriend. She's ringing again.
I think it's always important, but you very rarely find men who don't think they're good in bed. But
do you talk to other men about this stuff?
Yeah, we do. I mean, most men don't talk about what happens with their partners, but they might talk about, casual flings or things from the past.
But would they ever talk honestly about how do you please a woman, that sort of stuff?
No, I just don't. I suppose, I don't know. I was always interested in finding out how to do it. So that was, as a teenager, and I think my mum was a GP, and we always sort of had literature around, and there was so much going on. So, and she was always very open about it, and the family was very open about it. So there was no real mystery to it, and so.
But what about with your mates?
No, I never really would. I just presumed that they knew what they were doing. And it's really not really my problem.
But it's one of the big differences, I think, because women often have one or two good friends where they do talk very openly about some of these issues, and men much less so. I think you miss out on a valuable resource.
But I'm fascinated by, Robbie's talking about porn, and the way that, I suppose, especially, your 80s and 90s and stuff, and the girls I went to university with and how we were intimate. Some of the girls that I work with now who are in their 20s, I think they termed guys like me, the ones they hate, the feathery strokers, that are nice and intimate, or whatever way that we presumed it was supposed to be in the 90s, and they like to have their hair pulled, and they want someone to, I think she said, slam the back out of me. So, hey, but it's an interesting, and I think pornography's tainted the way that guys look at stuff, and it's also, as a result, women have fallen into those roles that men imagine that things are supposed to be, and it all gets out of whack.
Yeah. Well, I always thought, I think porn is teaching people a lot of good stuff too, not just bad stuff. I mean, there are different sorts of porn. But I used to have to smuggle slides of penises into the country back in the 1970s.
Wow, you were keen, weren't you?
Should have just smuggled penises.
And vaginas and vulvas and so on, because no one got a chance to ever look at anyone else in the 70s. The information just wasn't there. Everyone thought they were totally peculiar because they never saw another body.
What was the book in the library in the early 80s and late? I remember at my high school there was one book in the library that was constantly being stolen.
What's happening to me?
What's happening? The Joy of Sex. Yeah.
That's why I've got a beard, by the way, Joy of Sex.
That's good.
You get a beard, you get ladies.
Sure. Famous old book published in the 70s called The Joy of Sex. And the man had a beard. Yeah.
He had a beard. Thanks for filling everyone in. Topical. My parents had it. I remember going around, we had one of the ministers at the church going around, they had a little library in the manse, and they had 2 copies of it in the church.
Oh, it was a famous book. Now let's get on to cleavage. I think that's one of the really interesting issues. This assumption, as we all know, that women are entitled to dress however they like. I mean, that this is the big deal, and that if they want to get the girls out, that's their right, and it's not. There's no problem from the male point of view. Now, I wonder what that's actually like from the male point of view. How do you feel about that? Are there any issues as a male in not knowing where to look?
It's hard, isn't it, Robbie?
It can be.
Yeah, it's like because it's there, and then you feel bad because you look and it's there, and then you feel bad. And then but then you don't look. It's like you don't know what you're there. But it's hard when you get busted too, because especially if you sort of absent-mindedly just find yourself looking, and then you go, oh God, she just saw that I looked and I didn't want to look and just did. And I looked at my mother-in-law's cleavage the other day, and it's like, I'm sorry, Shez, I didn't mean to do that. She's a big-breasted woman and she was nude, so it's like, what am I supposed to do?
What were you doing?
I was looking at her in the shower, but that's not really. No, it's really embarrassing, isn't it?
Look, it is. The thing is, it's fundamental that men will naturally want to look at breasts. I mean, it's not a secret. It's fairly obvious. So if they are on display, it's how you go about it. I think it might have been Seinfeld, or there was a TV show that I remember one of the characters instructing one of the other characters, and it was like, you're doing it all wrong. You can't just sit there and look at a cleavage. What you have to do is you've got to use the horizon method, where you cast your eye across the horizon. Okay, but what you do is you take a snapshot as you go. So it's just a quick glance across, and then and then you keep looking around, but you've got the image there. So that way you're fulfilling any of those requirements internally, but you also are not offending anybody at the same time. Because
in the end, it's all about a woman is showing herself off to a target audience. There are some men, she wants to look at her, some men she doesn't mind having a good look, and the wrong one, the old, the ugly, the men who don't fit into her criteria.
No, it's disgusting to her.
It's disgusting, and if she catches them looking, then she's really annoyed. Now, I have real issues with that, and I've always wondered what it's like from the male point of view. If you find,
are we playing the role of the creepy old man? Or?
I mean, have you ever got told off for looking? And how did that make you feel?
No, I just glanced. Ching! It's like a motor drive.
There was a girl at work, and she put on Twitter that someone was looking at their boobs in the lift. So I went into the newsroom to ask who it was, but I looked at the wall just in case I did look down while I was asking who it was, and she didn't know the person. Oh yeah, I think women are pretty sophisticated though with that. I mean, they know that it's, men are a little bit hopeless in that area, and it's something where you try not to be offensive. And it's sort of I didn't think it's harmless. If you look at something, it doesn't mean anything other than you've looked at it. Hopefully. Well, no, if it's just really tragic if you're leering at something, but sometimes you can't help but have a look.
Yeah. No,
a glance.
A very subtle glance. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting issue. Let's move on to the whole married relationships, long-term relationships, and the sex-starved men issue. I mean, is this something that men talk to you about? You talk to each other about? Is it?
Sometimes. I think when it becomes a problem, you can. I mean, like I said, I think for women when they've had children, I can recall a period in my relationship, and I think my wife's pretty okay with me talking about this. She thinks I'm at a trivia night tonight. If she calls, everybody just pretend it's a pub. I'm only kidding. No, I mean, obviously after women have had children, the notion of, you've got babies all over you, and the notion of having some other baby all over you with other intentions is the furthest thing from her mind. And so there were definitely periods in our relationship where it was undoubtedly difficult, where you talked before about that testosterone drive, and it is something that I'm sure that all men in this room can relate to, where you do have that drive that propels you along, and it builds, obviously, and it's a difficult thing to wrestle with, because it's entwined with, as you mentioned, it is entwined with that sense of intimacy. It's not just about the sexual gratification. It's also about that sense of being needed and being loved. And for some reason, men, well, my pop psychology approach to it is that men somehow get those two elements infused together, and you feel that if you are given sex, or if you're able to have sex, that you do have that closeness that only comes with it. And that is part of that's an intimacy which I think is probably different to how women perceive it a bit. And it is a very strong drive. And when you don't get it, you do feel not just, you feel horny and all of that, but you actually feel a certain disconnect with your partner, and that is... Is
that living with your sister or living with a roommate?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not that bad. Obviously, there's multitudes of layers about any relationship, and, I know people who have talk about having, lots and lots of sex, but I know others who have indicated to me that they don't really have very much at all. And obviously, if you're on the same level of it with each other, then it's fine. But this whole discussion is about that separate levels. And so it can be difficult. And the groping thing is definitely another one. I have been in the past guilty of that too. And, I've been told, look, just put your hands away, forget it, I don't like it. And it actually took... I don't do it now, but I consciously have to stop myself from doing that. But the return is that, we have worked through things in that way. And we had that discussion. The reason I am doing this is because I feel this sort of need to... It's a pathetic adolescent behaviour, but it's one that, I and probably a lot of other men fall into, where you have that desire to have some kind of intimacy, even if it's as stupid as grabbing your partner's bum, And it is stupid. It is stupid.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous, but there is an impulse in there somewhere, and so you've got to make some sort of sense of it.
It never works. I mean, I haven't had
No shit.
No, that doesn't matter, but I so much haven't had it in my current relationship, one a while back, and, resentment plus erections is sort of like, oh, God, and it just builds, and then it's this terrible thing, and you don't especially when you're young, you don't understand it, and then you can't rationalise it. You just get angry about it, or especially as a much younger person.
You lose logic in it too.
Yeah, you do lose logic in it. And I was in a certain relationship, and I remember actually justifying it, thinking, well, everything else is good in my life. Maybe the trade-off is that I don't have a great sex life, and which is really sort of sad. But I had a wonderful friend who's 10 years older than me, and he talked me through how when he had a couple of kids, and how he, how much communication was the most important thing, and how it got after having the babies, that's what got their sex life back on track, and that was wonderful advice.
Yeah. Well, it's good. That's probably pretty rare that men actually open up and talk about that sort of stuff. Yeah. Give you hope, huh? Now, let's go back to the point.
Good luck.
give you the porn issue. I was just so intrigued by the 50 Shades of Grey, which was being presented as mummy's porn, and how wonderfully liberating it was that women were allowed to read all this stuff. And yet daddy's porn, of course, is a dirty little secret that he has to hide away. And I mean, if you were looking at porn, would you be nervous of being caught in your relationship? Or?
I was on holidays and I saw all these people reading, you know, the
50 Shades.
Yeah, around the pool and on the plane. If, you know, it's just like, oh, hang on a second. It's a book, but if I'd been there with a Playboy or a Penthouse back in the day, everyone would call me a creep. But I think porn's become so much more mainstream than when I was a kid, and Dad had a few magazines, and you'd sneak to have a look at them, and people openly talk about it, and I suppose women probably consume it more so now than obviously when I was a teenager. I didn't know any girls who were sort of interested in it or wanted to look at magazines or really thought about it, but the internet's changed all that, and the good and the bad with it, and you certainly see it over the years and how it's changed people's sexuality. And
well, that's always. I had one guy who told me when he was growing up, he used to leap on the Sunday paper in case there was a Kmart or Target catalogue with women in underwear. I mean, there's always been something to cater to this visual imagination, particularly of men. I mean, there is that big difference there, I think, between women responding more to the written word very often. Not all. Some women like the visual, but and wanting a bit of a plot and whereas men, it's much more looking at couples having fun. I mean, I've always thought that one of the things about porn is it's got this very negative image, and most of the men who talk to me about it are really just interested in looking at lovely naked women's bodies, which is of endless intrigue to them, and couples doing things together, and rather than anything violent or horrible. It's just. And it helped. Many men say to me, it helps them keep a lid on their sexual frustrations. That serves a really good purpose for them.
Yeah, look, undoubtedly it does in many ways. It's a very complex topic, and it's impossible to really do it any service in a forum like this, I think. I mean, when I was about 13 or 14, my aunt, who was studying, women's studies, and she gave me this book which was called Pornography. And it was, a long dissertation on the evils of pornography. And there were many. I was interested to read it. Didn't read all of it, but I read some of it. But it was given to me very much as if all pornography is bad, and if you are engaging with pornography, then you are doing a disservice to not just yourself but to those people that you're viewing. And from a gender study perspective, there's lots of unequal power relationships going on and those things. And I think there are a lot of areas like that which are fairly fundamental. That said, I like looking at naked ladies. So, but it's been I studied photography and I went to art college, and I have always had an interest in the visual, and nudes have always been a part of that as well. Guys having sex with women, probably not quite in the syllabus that I studied, but it's an extension of it. Where it does get sort of weird is that you sort of fear for the way your sexuality, when people are chasing a sexuality, they're always trying to better it a little bit. And so that's when you start to see, or start to get a sense that there's a lot of darkness going on. And, that's more of a worry to my mind.
Yeah, and we do hear a lot about that. And of course I think there's no question that some men get terribly caught up in it. But there are a lot of others who it's just part of their lives and not a big deal.
I think what's been interesting in the last 5 to 6 years with it is that women are less jealous of it, I think. They don't hear, my male friends don't talk about feeling like it's banned or it's naughty or something that has to be hidden away. You know, they don't feel like they have to clear their history on their computers, and it's far more accepted, and I suppose it's become so much more mainstream.
And of course, I mean, plenty of couples who, you know, you don't need to get the DVD out anymore, but, you know, with a Thai takeaway, or it's a Good Friday night thing, they share together. And I mean, which is
of course, Gary guy and a big.
But I mean, there's a big divide. I think some women are very resistant to it, and others who can see it. It is a good thing to get some new ideas, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what about erections?
Yes.
I don't have one now.
No.
So hang on, this is reality, isn't it? I'm in the library and we're talking erections, it's fine.
We're talking erections. We're talking about this glorious age of Viagra that you were lucky enough to be born into. But I wonder how much you know about what lies ahead for you, for instance, in terms of the big issues in terms of erections. And is this something you would talk to other people about? 1 in 2 men over 50 having trouble with erections. And but the wonderful treatments that are now available, is it something that is on your agendas? Is it something you know about?
It's something that I think as you... Look, I think it's...
Do you spend time thinking about the day when you don't have erections?
No, I don't, because...
I will now, thank you.
I'm pleased.
Look, it's not something that is on my radar, thankfully, at this stage of my life. But it's something that is... I mean, I think, again, it folds back into that sense of identity that sex and prowess is instilled into men. There is a sense, overtly or not, that you are considered more of a man if you're supposedly better in bed, or that you've got greater prowess in bed. And so, obviously, if you can't get an erection, then that's going to affect that sense of who you are as a man.
You don't think it would any sense for you about whether it would change your perception of yourself as a man if you couldn't get erections?
I'm sure it would, yeah. Undoubtedly it would. More so from the point of feeling like you were letting your partner down. I mean, look, that it has happened on a very rare occasion, to be honest. But it's and I expect as you get older, the likelihood of it happening is greater, and I sort of am aware of that. And that's fine. If it was something that really became chronic, then, you know, I think it would be very challenging.
But there's an acceptance now that if it happens, Viagra is part of that, and that will be what you do. Yeah.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope you go to your doctors, because one of the things that worries me is...
No, I'll just get it in Bali or something on the street. You get on the street corners.
There are all these ghastly... All of you who've seen those horrible billboards out there, that's a company that's making $70 million a year ripping off Australian men, offering the treatments that don't work. And it's because men are still too embarrassed to go to their local doctor and ask for the treatment.
But is that so much about erections or about lasting longer? So it's about premature ejaculation a bit more.
Well, they do both, but it's been mainly the erection thing that's got the big money in, and it just drives me nuts because, I mean, I just think it's so wonderful that we have these treatments. I used to sit there with these guys 30 years ago, and we had nothing to offer them. And they'd sit there with tears rolling down their cheeks, just devastated. And the treatments are out there, and a lot of men aren't fighting.
Do you know what? I think there'd be very few men that I would know who wouldn't be aware of Viagra. You know, I mean, to be honest, there are... not me, but there are definitely guys that I've known who have used Viagra with other drugs, actually, which is a dangerous thing to do.
But I would think probably, I don't know, 50, 60% of men I know who would have used it recreationally.
Yeah,
because they just for fun.
But I mean, of course, it's not just Viagra, and it's also about knowing how to use it. You know, you have to use Viagra maybe up to half a dozen times to see whether it's effective for you. And there are men who try it once and give up.
Is that just the men's site talking about this, or is this actually medical advice?
Right. This is absolute advice, you know. And that's what bothers me about all of this is men know about Viagra, they might have tried it, but they don't know how to use it properly, and they don't often get the information.
You don't rub it.
No, you don't rub it.
You put it in your ear.
Let alone, you know, 20,000 men a year diagnosed with prostate cancer, and many of them will have these issues suddenly having to deal with them. And a lot of doctors still aren't helping them properly with all of it. So it's a big area of your life. Now, maybe we have some questions from the audience now.
Oh, goodness me.
We need to get a micro.
I think I can make my voice.
No. It's because of this recording. We need to duck underneath.
No, I feel pressure about.
No, don't worry.
But that's
You need some Viagra.
Yeah.
I guess we touched on pornography, and you likened 50 Shades of Grey. Now, to me, that's just bad literature. So, I don't think you can really compare bad literature to male pornography, and you know, it's a different issue, but that's okay. That's a comment on literature, I guess. But sorry, I've lost my point, and I'm on film.
It may have been
this.
bad literature, but it was interestingly incredibly popular. The fact that she captured
it is incredibly popular, but you look at 50 Shades of Grey, and then you look at graphic literature for men, like graphic pornography for men, and women, it's acceptable. I'm shocked when I'm on trains and women are reading 50 Shades of Grey, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, and yet you won't let your husband look at Sports Illustrated or Playboy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that is the conundrum. I don't really understand why we treat the two so differently.
Right, thank you. Look, I think there's a fundamental issue in terms of men do equate sex with love, and that may not be the case with women. And I think that issue needs to be explored a lot more, and look at the two perspectives. But certainly from a male point of view, it is a very strong connection, and we express our intimacy that way. And I'd like to hear your comments on that, Bettina.
Yes, well, I totally agree with you, and I suppose I was using different language to talk about connection, but of course that is love. It's about, and the flip side of it is rejection, of course. It's not just about living without love, it's about living in a relationship where you never feel wanted and never feel desired by your partner. And I mean, they've always said that women need that sense of closeness in order to want sex, and they don't understand why the sex is so important to the men, whereas men, the sex gives them that sense of being loved and wanted and desired, and without it, a relationship is really missing something. I find it so extraordinary talking to men who go for year after year after year without that. And that's what we don't hear about. We don't hear about men's restraint. We always hear about men, having affairs, men getting into trouble. But, I mean, I had one man who went for nearly 20 years in his marriage with no sex, and she wouldn't even, after her second child was born, she said she just wasn't interested. She wouldn't even let him touch her, let alone look at her. And he eventually left the marriage, and it was actually quite a good marriage in other ways. And she was so perplexed that he would leave for the sake of sex. But as he said, I mean, he just couldn't bear the idea of going through the rest of his life feeling he was never wanted.
But you're taking very much the side of men, which is refreshing from a man's point of view. But is it not that men should try and understand women a bit more?
Yeah. Look, I talk a lot about the male perspective because hardly anyone ever does. But I mean, there are two sides. The other side of that equation is being in a relationship as a woman, feeling you don't want sex and having this man grope you and having this man harass you and drive you crazy and wondering why you don't want sex anymore. I have a lot of really miserable women writing for me who are really unhappy about having lost their libido, lost their mojo. Where's it gone? Why do I feel like this? And how frustrating it is. Women who... there was a lovely young mother of twins who was writing for me, and she was so upset about the fact that she was constantly rejecting her partner. And this whole idea of why do I feel like this and why can't I want him? It's agony from both points of view. Yeah, any?
Question for Bettina, just on this particular subject about relationships and how they tend to fall into this situation of lack of intimacy and for whatever reason. is this a physiological thing because women and men are getting older and women, hormonal at that stage in their potential 50s or whatever, are experiencing different things? Or is it a mental thing where just relationship complacency, potentially?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think it is boredom. It is the same old body. It's the same old same person approaching you in exactly the same way. It's all of that. I think it's at its heart, it's a biological, that men have up to 20 times the level of testosterone, and that, to me, really makes a difference. I mean, I talk to 80-year-old men who say, I want sex as much as I ever did. The itch never went away for me. And there are some women like that. I had my juicy tomatoes, these wonderful women who had very strong sex drives. And there are women who are going up the wall, wanting sex and feeling constantly rejected, just as men do. And women who really struggle as a result of being in those relationships and coping with that. We don't know why that is. I mean, they've looked a lot at measuring levels of hormones in women, and there are no clear patterns here, but I mean, to me, that's definitely something biological at the heart of it, which results in women having this distractible, fragile libido, and it means life gets in the way of us wanting sex. I wrap up sex in all the garbage of the day, one woman said to me. So she goes to bed and she's lying there and thinking, oh, does the ceiling need painting? And have I got cornflakes for breakfast tomorrow? And wondering why her mother-in-law was so nasty to her. Everything's there, everything's in bed with her, and it all gets in the way of her feeling like having sex. That is such a common experience for women, that they can always list off 15 reasons why they don't feel like having sex tonight. I'm sure you know these men. But if you take her away and take her on a holiday to Bali and she's all relaxed, then she might want to have sex, although men are always saying to me, I've taken her to Bali and nothing happened. So it's really complex. I think it's a mixture of biology, it's a mixture of men not necessarily being good lovers, not necessarily doing the things that make her feel appreciated. Does laundry get you laid? That's a good question. Do you think doing more housework gets you more sex?
The latest study says you don't do laundry, you do man chores.
There was a study out just last week, wasn't
there?
Right.
That's right.
That the men who did more housework got laid less. But of course, historically, everybody has said that if you clean the house, then there's a greater chance that
what
you're
do you
going to
reckon?
get laid.
Is there an equation?
I reckon there is, yeah. Undoubtedly.
If you do. I think the hard thing is that people, things start so wonderfully, and none of us really deep down want to have to work at a relationship. We want it to just be perfect, and I think that's the struggle with it. You think, oh God, I have to do something nice to get the. Why can't it just be like it used to be? And I think if you can get your head past the fact that yes, you need on all levels of your relationship, you have to work at it, and you have to be considerate, and you have to give and take, and I think it sort of works for you. And when I was doing that. It's strange with one of these things with Twitter, and they did show for the ABC Agony Uncles, and one of the things I talked about, and it was just one of those things, was about when you have a relationship and fighting, and I said, well, there's no joy to be had winning an argument over someone you love. I get these sort of tweets, people going, yeah, that makes sort of sense to me, and I think that's the thing. If I've seen too many friends who just get so excited about, I won this argument and I've defeated the person I'm in love with, and where's the joy in that? You want to be able to do everything together. You want it to be as good as it possibly can be. And so but we're waking up one day and go, God, I've been with this person for a certain amount of years now, and it's not everything's as easy as it used to be. But hey, I want to stay with them. It's really important to me. Okay, yeah, I am going to become that cliched person like it always said it was going to happen. Yes, I have to work at my relationship. And if you accept that, I think it makes things a lot easier.
Although I have had women who say, I watch him cook the dinner, I know he's looking for the green light, but I'm such a bitch because he's not going to get it. I mean, there are women who are very aware of the fact that their husbands are working really hard to try to win them over.
Well, this is interesting thing.
And holding it off.
You do touch on your book about that. And look, it is an interesting aspect where if you can actually get to that point where, and it does come about from working in a relationship. But if you are able to negotiate it so that they understand how much sex does mean to you, and I think what you said about it relating to love is a really strong point, whether it's love or a strange tangential sense of intimacy that is, it's very special. It's almost, it sounds a bit creepy, but it's almost Oedipal. It's that sense of really being connected to somebody. And once they, you know, if you have that negotiation, it is a lovely thing to be given the green light, if you like, knowing that it's not really what your partner is feeling like, but they're giving it in a gesture of love.
And generosity.
A generosity of love.
Yeah.
And that is a very special thing. And I know that that's a slightly controversial thing in some ways, and I know that you got a lot of flack for talking about that. But it is something that is, when you reach that lovely equilibrium in your relationship, and that, you know, it does happen, when it's given to you like that, it's a beautifully open, giving expression in a relationship.
And of course it applies to men too. I mean, my whole point about just do it, I mean, the idea of being sexually generous and making love perhaps without desire, because you know once you get going you will enjoy it, which is something a lot of women experience. But that applies to men too. I mean, as I said, I have these women who are being rejected by their partners, and the classic scenario is the older man who starts to worry about his erections and then just goes into retreat, doesn't go near her, because it's easier for many men not to have sex at all than to have sex and fail. And their partners are just crying out to be touched and wanted. I mean, they end up in the same situation as many men do. I was talking to a woman who runs a prostate cancer supporters group the other day, and she said she's always got women in tears in that group. Big women who thought they were totally over sex, and all of a sudden they're with their husband who's not coming near them, and they suddenly realise how much it meant to them to have that man at them all the time and wanting them all the time. And without it, they don't feel like a woman, they don't feel loved, And so, you know, here too, the man has to get that and understand that it's important to her to feel needed. So it works both ways. Question over here?
Yes, Bettina, I want to sort of disagree with your two male panel members, and I'm just wondering your thoughts on intimate touching. This word grope, it's been really problematic here tonight, because I think even in the absence of sex for whatever reason, that intimate touching is quite a wonderful thing, and I'd just like your thoughts on that.
Well, I think we probably all agree. I don't know, we have to ask about this, but I would say the trouble is when an intimate touching from a male point of view feels like a grope from her point of view.
It's an uninvited intimate touch, essentially, and that's what we're saying. You know, it's when you're cooking dinner and, you know, you grab your partner's ass and she's just like, let it go.
Yes, Robbie, that's fine. That's a grope.
Yeah.
What about the intimate touching that could be between people of all ages, like somebody in their 80s who cuddles their partner?
Yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a grope. I mean, and we're talking about in a relationship. Where I was coming from was in a relationship. I had to have a discussion about, again, negotiating. Sort of, it was actually annoying my partner when I would do that, and so she said, "Can you not do it?" And I went, "Okay." I had to think about it because it was a sort of strange automatic reaction that I didn't really contemplate very much, and so in that kind of context, it was annoying her greatly, and it wasn't really. It certainly wasn't adding to the potential of anything good.
It's a silly continuation, even though you know that what you're doing is not working and it's not going to help at all. But something just, you know, it's ridiculous, and
the other problem we have is you don't know. I mean, the way people start to approach each other is often through touch. No, you put your hand on her knee and see how she reacts or whatever, and you don't know whether you're going to be... I mean, I think a lot of men have to take a lot of risks in making the approach and being knocked back, and then they know, well, no, she's not in the mood tonight.
Yeah. I think, you know, it's... there are grey lines about all these things, and I understand sort of what you're saying, and I think it's important not to feel that you can't have unannounced sense of physical intimacy with your partner. But, fundamentally, I think there's a lot of blokes going, well, I know what you mean. You're in the kitchen and you thought you'd give it a go, and it just wasn't very appropriate. And it's like, cut that down a little bit.
Does it come down to the frequency of the group?
Probably, yeah.
No, but it also...
Maybe.
I know, how bad is that? And when we get too old to be groped, how ghastly is that? Yeah. I know, and your point, I was just thinking about some of the older people who contact me who are desperate not to be groped, but just to be touched. A woman in her 80s wrote to me talking about skin hunger and how she has grandchildren who crawl all over her, and she has, family and so on, but she wants to be touched. And how appallingly badly we treat that whole issue of touch and the elderly, and even people in in homes and nursing homes, and someone who's got Alzheimer's and is starting to touch the nurse who's helping him in the shower. I mean, why wouldn't he? Anyway. So it's a very interesting area, that one.
So what about young women? You're talking about men's... You're talking about the men groping and men wanting sex and women not, but what about the reverse? I mean, you've got 50 Shades of Grey and people reading bits and pieces on the newspaper and trains, whatever. But what about from a women's point of view? I mean, you're both married, so that's a little bit different to being single, but what about from, I guess, the other side? It's not just men that necessarily want to get rejected, but what about the other side?
Are you talking about in relationships or in...
Starting a relationship, in a relationship. It actually works both ways. There are a lot of women that actually want intimate relationships that men actually have chosen not to for whatever. So it actually works both ways.
I think single women, and lots of single women want sex and are not getting any sex.
Not just about single women, it's actually about married women as well.
Yeah, I remember.
And it is. I have two gorgeous friends, and really gorgeous friends who have been married for between 5 and 10 years, and they are desperate for their partners to want to have that intimate relationship, and to the point where they've been to their GPs and they've been to counsellors, and their counsellors blame them. They say, you should be more desirable, because there is this lack of general acceptance that, hang on, it might be a man who doesn't actually, for whatever reason, have that sexual drive.
There are men who have very low libido all their lives. There are men who start off with, a high libido and then lose it for various reasons. A whole string of medical, all sorts of things can happen. And it's dreadful. It's just, I think in some ways it's possibly even, I don't know if I should say that, but even worse for women, because of course women turn it on themselves and think, gosh, it must be that I'm unattractive, why doesn't he want me? And of course to be in a situation as a woman surrounded by other women who are saying, I wish my husband would leave me alone, and you have a husband who won't come near you, is just ghastly. And I have so many women I talk to about that. There's no question, but they're actually enormously outnumbered by people in the opposite situation, if you look at all of the research on this.
I guess we're speaking about what men want, so...
Yeah.
Different conversation.
They're there, but the juicy tomatoes are not a happy group of women, generally, because it's hard to be in that situation. I had this lovely young woman who was in her early 30s who said she would love to have sex 3 times a day. And, she constantly spent her life thinking of how good it would be to get a lot more sex. And her husband wasn't writing for me initially, wasn't keeping a diary, and I eventually got to talk to him on the phone, and he said, I know she's always complaining to everybody that she doesn't get enough, but she never initiates. And I thought that was really interesting, because I went back to her and said, well, tell me, why is this? Is this true? And she said, well, yeah, early in our relationship, I came onto him and he knocked me back, and I just couldn't deal with it. I mean, women struggle enormously with that sense of rejection in that situation. And the men, so many of the men are so resilient. One man said, every 10 times I might be lucky, and he's getting slapped away and knocked away, and he keeps popping up for more. I have enormous admiration for men and their resilience in this situation, whereas women, it just eats them up.
We don't quite often need much. We're pretty simple.
Sorry, where are we going? Here.
Hi. My question is about the change in the way we view porn now, which was once, the Playboys. It was pretty much something fairly benign, and I'm not sure whether internet porn is not going to have consequences for young people. I'm not a parent myself, but I imagine, I hear you are, but I'd be interested in how you would feel having teenagers and just being a bit concerned about whether that might be an issue for them or for youth in general in the future.
Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, look, I'm nervous about it. There's no doubt. I think that all parents are. It's there, and there's a lot of it. I'm interested to see whether it self-regulates in terms of young. I mean, my hope is that maybe there will be a sense of self-regulation amongst young men that actually this stuff's pretty bad and pretty creepy. But it's really hard to know. I mean, so much of it is going on in private, I guess. And I think undoubtedly you see the way porn has permeated fashion, for example. It's so overwhelming in the way that a lot of fashion is drawn from porn. A lot of, I think the pubic hair thing's a really interesting one. I am just on that golf. Guys only a few years younger than me just don't like pubic hair at all, and I love it. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you only have to.
But it's it's an interesting one, and that is just to take that point. I mean, I think that is something where you have porn literally influencing a whole generation of behaviour.
I thought it was Sex and the City that introduced this whole idea. I think it's a bit debatable whether it's porn that introduced it.
You've got it. There wouldn't be, the expectation of young men about anal sex or all sorts of things, or group sex, or where they ejaculate.
Oral sex. Now, just think about that. Porn introduced men to going down on women, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And it taught them a lot about that. It's changed the whole view of oral sex, which is a fascinating thing, because when I was first working as a sex therapist, men used to talk to me about oral sex as some dream they had in the back of their minds that they never really thought would ever be fulfilled. It was just out there. And now it's an hors d'oeuvre. It comes. Many young couples have oral sex before they have intercourse, and I think that's probably actually a good thing.
I don't have a problem with that one.
Because I think delaying intercourse is probably a good idea for all sorts of reasons. And it's always presented as a terrible thing because it's women servicing men, and yet if you look at the research on this, in fact, it's many men would like, young men would like to go down on the women, and it's the women who are very often resisting because they're still not comfortable with their own bodies, which is a fascinating thing that we still haven't accepted the idea that any man would actually want to do that. I think some of these changes are good changes that we should celebrate rather than seeing it all as negative.
No comment.
No comment. And I have young adults as children who have done very nicely in this and know a lot about sex, partly through porn and partly through having parents that talk to them about these things. And that's how you counter it.
And I think that is true. I think that there are going to be a lot of course, there's going to be a huge number of young, smart kids who are healthy, have a healthy understanding of what relationships are, and hopefully have spoken in their peer groups and potentially to their parents as well about what is, what is okay and what isn't. And I think that comes down to understanding that you're being respected by somebody. The minute that you feel that you're not actually being respected by the person that you're with that you're having sex with is the minute you should stop it. And
I just think there's a generation of kids who've had their sexuality hijacked by someone else's image of it. I think it's really troublesome. I think it's really, and you hear the anecdotes, you talk to people, and I think it's really sad.
Yeah, well, I suppose I talk to lots of people about sex, and I hear a lot of pretty positive stuff too. And what I hear also is mothers in particular doing a terrific job putting this all in context, talking to the young people growing up about sexuality, talking not so much about the nuts and bolts, but about, you know, how do you look after yourself as a woman? How do you protect yourself? How do you be a decent? How do you grow up as a decent young man and treat women properly? That's the sort of stuff parents need to talk about. And the really sad thing is how rarely I hear, "Oh yes, Dad talked to me about that." Men are still being left out of all those conversations. Women are generally really engaged, with lots of them, with their young people growing up, and it really worries me that this lesson is still there, that men don't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. Look, to be honest, the reason I said yes to coming along tonight is because I think it is an area that does need to be discussed more, and even amongst my male friends, I might have one close friend that I would talk about my sex life with, and that would be about it. So, and you all, of course, are very close to me.
So we might actually wrap it up tonight. We've gone a little bit over time, but in one word, guys, really quickly, what do men really want?
Oh, geez.
After you.
Come on.
And they melt into a big puddle on the floor.
Fellatio.
Hardest question of the night.
No, I don't think we can distill it down to one word, because it's complex and nuanced, as we have indicated tonight.
This is Big Ideas on ABC TV.